All right, shalom, everybody. I wanted to get into a little bit more of the Paul issue. And I think it's important because it's something that our people don't consider when it comes to the things they're teaching from and who they're from. I talked a little bit about the compilation of the Bible and how the kings, 1500 years after the fact, put all of the books together in one volume, whereas in our heritage, we always held a book or a prophet's testimony on its own merit. So it was easy for them to put Paul and his writings into there and mix it in with the prophets, mixing the holy with the profane. And that's just some serious business right there because the Most High doesn't play with that. Look at this on the screen, just to give you a taste of what I'm saying. He says, Son of man, this is Ezekiel, thou art a land that is not cleansed. First he says, the Elohim came unto me, saying, Son of man, say unto her, thou art a land that is not cleansed, nor rained upon in the day of indignation. There is a conspiracy of her prophets in the midst thereof, like a roaring lion ravening the prey. They have devoured souls, and they have taken the treasure and precious things. And you see how greedy our preachers are today. And I can imagine, it's a degree of that even in the awakened, so-called awakened Hebrews who are dealing with Paul and mixing the holy with the profane, which I'm basically talking to both demographics. Well, anyway, he says, they have made her many widows in the midst thereof. And her priests have violated my law and have profaned mine holy things. They have put no difference between the holy and the profane. Neither have they showed difference between the unclean and the clean, and have hid their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them. That's some serious stuff. That's what we're talking about right here. And this is what I'm addressing most of these videos when it's dealing with Paul to the teachers, those who are supposed to be feeding the sheep, and they're poisoning them. There's no other way to say it. So let's get into this. Let's jump into it. Now, we know that Paul basically taught, and his letters were sent to by synagogue or by way of synagogues. So let's take a look at the history of that. And let's go from there. Now, I wanted to go to first Acts. Then we can go back and show and verify some things. Now, he says that where they're taking the stage here, where they had hired Stephen, the disciples had added, because there was some murmuring among the Grecians, among the Hebrews, because their widows were neglected in the daily administration, which kind of infers that the black women were taking care of the Grecians, being that the synagogues were probably owned and operated by the Grecians, being the Gentiles. And he said, then these 12 called the multitude of the disciples unto them, and said, it's not reason that we should leave the word of God and serve tables, or the word of Yah and serve tables. Okay, so they basically telling them that, look, we ain't going to be serving y'all when it comes to our servitude to the Most High. So they chose 7 men. And, this is the list of them. Nicholas, which I assume to be Nicholas of the Nicolaitans, but that's a whole nother thing. But here's what we're talking about. He says, now then there arose certain of the synagogue, which is called the synagogue of the Libertines. So they're starting in terms of introducing us to these, the distinction between the church and the synagogue. And he said, now the synagogue of the Libertines, the Cyrenians and Alexandrians, and of them of Cilicia and of Asia, and they were disputing with Stephen. Now you think about what they're saying here. These are all Gentiles, libertines. Let's look at that in the Hebrew, right? Roman freedmen, which I kind of sniff or smell a little odor of Freemasons and all that, but that's another issue. Well, anyway, and Alexandrians, remember Apollos? We got into Apollos, and let's look at that. Let's look at that. Oops, put an E there instead of a. All right, Alexandria. I'm sorry, guys. A little discombobulated here a little bit. Alexandria, and let me put the E in there. I'm spelling it all wrong. My spelling is all off today. Alex. All right, well, let's see what we got here. Now, there was a certain Jew born at Alexandria, an eloquent man, mighty in the scriptures. Now, let's go into that. Just a little recap of the last study. Right? Right. Now let's look at that. Apollos, right? It's a pagan deity, demon, that is the sun. Let's look at that from the root, or the same as Apollonia. This is where we get all our Apollo 11 and all of that. This is all commemorative to that. Apollo 12 and Apollo 13 and all of that stuff dealing with space travel and all that. It's all dealing with that. Now, let's go back and recap the demon from the bottomless pit. All right? Now, let's look at that. And this is the guy he hanging out with. This is the guy he hanging out with, right? Apollyon. So let's look at that in that scripture. Right? That's Revelation 9:11. See that? The angel of the bottomless pit. This is the same word as Apollos. And that right there cannot be refuted. Here it is, it's right in your face. So in terms of knowing what you worship, you know, the passage Messiah said, you worship what you know not what. We don't know what we worshiping. And he tells you when it comes to Apollos that Paul would water and he would give the increase. Very important knowing the holy from the profane. Everything hinges on you understanding what's of the Most High and what's of his adversary. I can't stress that enough. Well, anyway, let's continue. And going back to the synagogue thing, let's go back there. Let's go back to, I'm going to go back here. I don't want to waste time here. We got a lot to cover. All right. Now, let's get rid of the Strong's numbers. Okay. And let's expand it a little bit too. All right. Now let's look at that. Let's look at the Alexandrians, right? So we to understand the Alexandrians, right? And they were Libertines, Cyrenians, and Alexandrians, and of Cilicia and Asia disputing with Stephen. So let's get into that a little deeper. First, let's get into a little bit of the differentiating what he was teaching concerning the law and what we know of as, the Levitical priesthood ordinances as given to Moses. All right. Let's start with Galatians 2. Right, let's go with 17, 18. Let's go there. He says, we are Jews by nature and not sinners of the Gentiles. Oh, this was when Peter came. I stood him face to face because he was to be blamed. Ooh, let's go back there. So everybody talk about that second Peter where he look at what he's spewing. He says, but when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face because he was to be blamed. For before that certain came from James, he did eat with the Gentiles, but when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which are of the circumcision. See, he's differentiating himself and distinguishing himself from those who were circumcised, which would have been our people. And the other Jews dissembled likewise with him, insomuch that Barnabas was also carried away with this dissimulation. Now let's look at what that word means, what he's accusing Peter of. Let's look at that word dissimulation in the scripture. I wasn't going to go here, but let's go there just for the record. Right? Am I missing it here? Okay, all right. Right? Where's the word at? Where is it? Am I passing it or something, guys? Hold on. Let me slow down. Paul accepted by the Gentiles. That must not be where I'm at here then. 17. Let me go down there to 17. There we go. Sorry about that, guy. All right, now. So he's accusing him of dissimulation. And that word is hypocrisis. Hypocrisis, where we get the word hypocrisy. So he's calling Peter a hypocrite. No one looks at that. No one looks at how he's coming in him, because he basically, he's separating himself, Peter, I'm assuming, because they accused him. If you don't know the story, they accused him of, what are you doing eating with Gentiles? You know what I mean? And eating with the unclean and the uncircumcised. And I guess Peter kind of caught feelings about that, if you know the story and all that. But going back to it, like I look at this right here, this passage here, I know this is a sidebar, but no, never mind. We're not even going to go there. Let's continue where we're at. Let's continue looking at so let's look at these blasphemies of the law. Well, he says, now we are Jews by nature and not sinners of the Gentiles, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law. So he's saying they're Jews by nature. They ain't had to be Jews by the bloodline of the seed of Abraham and Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You know what I mean? Even though they do, in terms of Isaac, they would claim lineage. That's how they connect themselves to Abraham's seed, is because being of the Edomite seed, Jacob and Esau being the sons of Isaac, they can claim that heritage and that lineage. So that's not nothing that they haven't considered in terms of this deception. Let's get that straight right there. Well, anyway, he said, not knowing the man He's saying that we are the Jews by nature and not sinners of the Gentiles, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith of their Jesus Christ, which is son of Zeus. But I digress. Even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we may be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. That's blasphemy. David said, I delight in the law. He couldn't survive without his law. The prophets understood that the law was it was the separation of you being a sinner and you being righteous. All dependent on the law. Those are his commandments. How can you separate yourself? This is the reason why the doctrine of Paul is so toxic, because he's basically saying that you can forget about the law, because the law causes you to sin. And anything you do that's unsavory, particularly if it's in the commission of making a proselyte, according to what Messiah was accusing them of, that it's okay because you have an advocate with the Father, with this, they call him Jesus. And that's by design. And I'll get into it a little bit, why they call him Jesus by design and not son of Zeus. Okay? Now let's look at Titus, and we'll get into Titus in a minute, but just get into something when you're dealing with the cohorts and the men who we consider the supporting cast of Paul. Now listen to what he says here to them. He says in Titus chapter 3, he says, when I shall sin, and he's talking to Titus, and he's telling him, giving him instructions and all that, and telling him how he should behave, and how his temper is, how he's supposed to deal with the uncircumcised, and this, well, not the uncircumcised, but the circumcised, meaning us. Avoid foolish questions and genealogies, because that was a big thing back to in the days of Esther and in Nehemiah and Ezra and them, where when you were coming back to Israel and coming back from the 70-year captivity, that they used written genealogies from the records in order to prove that they belonged there and they were of the seed of Yehudi. They were of the seed of Judah. They belonged there. And the contentions and strivings about the law, for they are unprofitable in vain. So he's telling you, basically watered it down to where he said this is where they get the word in the Catholic Church, where a man that is a heretic, to get rid of the A, and that's the word they use, a heretic, after the first and second admonition, reject. All right. Now listen to what he says here. Now let's go into the Strongs on that. He says, now when I shall sin, now Paul's going to send Artemis unto thee, to Chicus, and be diligent unto me into Nicopolis, for I have determined there to winter, and bring Zenas the lawyer and Apollos on their journey diligently, that nothing be wanting unto them. Right? Okay, so let's look at these in the Hebrew. In the Greek, rather, their language. Now he's saying, now he's going to send Artemis, right? Now Artemis, this is where they get that term from. It's a Greek, let's look it up so we see it clearly, right? It's a Grecian goddess borrowed by the Asiatics for one of their deities, Diana. And where you get this from, it's this duality, because we use it sometimes. You see that term Artemis. There's a space program named after it, in the Artemis. You know about Artemis. I'm not familiarizing you with a name you've never heard of. You know this name, and they're telling you that it's another name for deities. In other words, demons. demons who are worshipped as gods. Right? Now let's look at the next one. Right? Tuncano. I don't know who that one is. Fortunate, Taquitos. Taquicos. Well, that doesn't ring any bells. So let's continue. Now let's go to Venus and Apollo. Now let's go to Venus, right? Venus is where they get that Zeus. See? Zeus or Dis. These are the different languages, how they pronounce it. Dis, we had that Duce liquor with that weird looking cross on it. I mean, come on, people. The mythology and the symbology all wrapped into this deception. And it means Jove given. Jehovah, which means ruin in Hebrew. Dirun, to sacrifice. Right? And you know what Apollo is. Where's Apollo at? He said he's going to send that one and Apollo. You know what that one is. That's a pagan deity of the sun. Are you following what I'm saying? He's sending you people who have names and their words are basically an application to the demonic realm. These are all, come on. I mean, this is really deep. Now let's look at Titus. I wanted to show you something with Titus I want to show you something with Titus in Wikipedia. Now, this is the Titus, and this is Saint Titus. Now, look at this Titus. This is Titus Vespasian. This is the son of Vespasian, the guy who was the emperor of Rome during the destruction of Jerusalem. And his father, or his son, name was Vespasian, and his son Titus, right? Let me clarify that. Right? And he's saying that this is a little bit of history, and I'm with the Jewish Roman War. There was a few wars that we had with them, and this was all under the siege. And if you don't know anything about the Caesars are in the curses. I'm just going to go back to that just to remind people a little bit about the things that not dealing with the law because of Paul teaching y'all not to. Some of the things that you forget that are written about. Now he says, this is a prophecy wrapped in the curses. He said, so that he will not give to any of them of the flesh of his children whom he shall eat. Now let's go back for context. He says, so that the man that is tender among you and very delicate. Oh, wait a minute. Let's go back to 53. And thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body and the flesh of thy sons and thy daughters, which the Yahweh thy Elohim have given thee in the siege and in the straitness, wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee. This was written about in Josephus as well, where the children were being eaten by their parents because the siege, nothing was coming in or out, no food or supplies or medicine or water, nothing could come in and out. And he said, so that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil towards his brother, and toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave, so that he will not give to any of them of the flesh of his children whom he shall eat, because he hath nothing left of him in the siege. This is deeper than you can imagine. And Titus was responsible for that siege. This guy right here. All right, let's continue. Now let's look at him as opposed to the Titus that this guy is supposed to be the bishop, and how they separated this history from this history. This history tells you about his life. He was a Greek. And if you notice, in those days, the word Greek was thrown around as like we considered to be Hebrew. It wasn't necessarily your ethnicity. You know what I mean? It was basically your race. You know what I mean? That's why they had the the Roman Empire. It's under the Greco-Roman Empire. And Hellenization, where the culture of the Greeks was because of the race of Grecians, and which is really, irregardless of their ethnicity, because Chittim is basically of Cyprus. Let's look at that. Prove that. So they're saying when Alexander the Great was the king of Chittim, well, he didn't even come from Chittim. I mean, he didn't even come from Greece or Athens or any of those places, right? Let's look at that. He said, the ship shall come from the coast of Chittim. That's a whole reference to the slave trade that we've been glossing over for years with this slave Bible introducing Paul into it. You know what I mean? We've forsaken one for the other. Don't get it twisted. Right? Now look at what he's saying. It means kitty or kitii. Partial from an unused name denoting Cyprus, only in the plural, a Kittite or Cypriite. Hence an islander, because Cyprus is an island. It's that island right across the Red Sea or the Mediterranean from the coast of Israel and in between Egypt. So that's a whole nother debunked reality. Because so far people think that's a reality. It's not. Well, anyway, he said that this is all the information. He was a Greek. He studied philosophy for his early years. It seems to have been converted by Paul, and wherein he was a secretary and an interpreter in the year 48 or 49. Okay? Now, the siege was 66 AD. So this would have been 27 years prior to him going in under his father's authority and doing what he did to Jerusalem. I mean, it's incredible. All right. So this history, and you see where it goes. Nothing. This is all you're getting. They have no information on him because they can't. Everything in his history as this bishop only relates to Paul. Right? This right here is his history. So apparently, wherever he was in Macedonia, where he hooked up with Paul, he says, now after the Titus journeyed north and met Paul in Macedonia, which, as you know, is the place where the birthplace of Alexander the Great. He's supposed to have been Philip the Macedon, his father, and Alexander, the king of Macedonia. Well, at any rate, this is also just reminiscent with Artemis and Zeus and all of those other characters he was dealing with. I'm starting to get the feeling that and the impression that this could be connected to, when you talk about the dragon and how the dragon has 7 heads and 10 horns. And according to the book of Enoch, that these were 7 demons. If you're looking at the actual dragon, there's a spiritual dragon where it's made up of the demons, and there's a earthly dragon which is made up of the nations that serve this demons. It tells you in Revelation they give them their authority, and these nations are the one that reigned with the beast for an hour, which is the 10 nations that he set on the horns. And we could get into that, but it'll take us off on a serious tangent. But let's look at, since we're on the heritage of it, let's just look at first century Jews of Alexandria. Right? And we were talking about that, where Apollos came from and how Alexandria made Egypt his capital in 363 BC, or prior to that, but he died in 3. You know what I mean? But at any rate, he conquered the whole known world, starting from what I could tell around 310. He started his campaign of wars, and he just, didn't stop until he had conquered the whole known world. But anyway, this dates back to the founding of the Alexander the Great in 332 BC. Okay, so that's a year before he died. Jews in Alexandria played a crucial role in the political, economic, culture, and religious life of the Hellenistic and Roman Alexandria. See this? With Jews comprising about 35% of the population of the Roman era. These are not the Jews you're thinking about, though. He said Alexandrian Jews were the founders of Hellenistic Judaism. Right? So these were Gentiles, basically the Pharisees. Right? And he says where they were the first to translate the Torah from Hebrew to Koine Greek, and a document known as the Septuagint. That's the document or the Bible that they consider to be their terms of the law, and their history as it relates to the law and the history of the prophets, and they're basically their Old Testament. Okay, and it says you hear the Septuagint referred to the Greek Old Testament in the translation of the 70. Right? And the earliest extant Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible from the original Hebrew. The full Greek title derives from the story recorded in the letter of Aristeas, which I have a copy of, to the Philocrates. I'm assuming that's the way you pronounce it, Philocrates or whatever, like Pilates or whatever, but I digress. He said the laws of the Jews and were translated into the Greek language at the request of Ptolemy, which was one of Alexander the Great's, this one being Ptolemy II. He would have been Ptolemy, which was one of Alexander's generals' son. And Philadelphia, this is, this was because Philadelphia, where that word Philadelphia is at, or Philadelphus. That's from one of the 7 candlesticks, where the Most High said that his 7 golden candlesticks. And one of them was the Church of Philadelphia. We're all talking about Greeks now and how they ran everything in this realm. And we were in captivity. You know what I mean? At least the 10 tribes at that point. Those that were in Judah or Jerusalem and that, they wouldn't go into that part of captivity until AD 70 and afterwards. All right? And he said, with 72 Hebrew translators, 6 each from the 12 tribes of Israel. So in other words, what they were saying is they translated it to the Hebrews, gave it to them, and they basically were those who gave them the history, and their people translated it. Don't let it fool you. We never learned. the book of I think it's Philo, and it's a few other books, Josephus, they tell you that we didn't learn Hebrew. Plus, there were no schools set up in Jerusalem. You never read of any schools set up in Jerusalem during the days of Messiah where they were teaching us Greek. It took them 100 years into the mid first century, 150 or so AD, for them to have the first translation of these Bibles. It took them that long to translate the Gospels and all that because they spoke them in Hebrew. But at any rate, what I'm saying to you is that this translation is not what it seems to be. And I'll go to that just to illustrate this point. We have a prophecy that directly relates to our heritage when it comes to Babylon, right? Now let's look at this for a second. Babylon, and let's look at it particularly in Jeremiah 50 and 51. Let's get rid of that. And I'm going to show you just how the influence of them on our scriptures, the tampering with it, and how they had no respect and honor for it. We're going to show you exactly what they did in terms of tampering with our scriptures and the prophecies, dealing with what we know of is our reality today. Now let's look at the book of Jeremiah, where he says, and this is a prophecy. So maybe some of y'all will learn about it, because this is where you have prophecies of Jeremiah's Babylon description of Nebuchadnezzar and what he was doing at that time, and the future king of Babylon, which was known of as the daughter of Babylon. That's the distinction. Don't let anybody fool you. Now here we go. Now he says now, Jeremiah 50 and 51. Let's go to this one right here. I'm going to go to where he says the sword is upon the Chaldeans. And, okay, let's go to that one. And he says, behold, I will raise up against Babylon. And I always believed, if you know anything about my studies, that America is Babylon. And against them that dwell. It's not a system. Don't get it twisted. You know what I mean? That's a lot of, it's misrepresented Babylon and the concept of it in terms of Babylon being a system of government and political alliance between European nations and all that. Not so. Scriptures, particularly in Revelation 18, before we go back to Jeremiah 51, let's look at Revelation 18. Let you know that this is a nation. All right, don't get it twisted. Babylon has fallen, become a habitation of devils. All right. And all right, now let's look at this. He says, that great city. Right? So the great city with that would be like a greater city, where it's a city made up of many cities. That would be considered America. That's why they call it the great city Babylon. So it's impossible for it to mean a group of European nations mixed with American nations and not all making up the system. That's impossible. They're talking about one sense. They're talking about one government, one nation. And this nation deals with, and she rules over the earth. It says, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with him, live deliciously with her. It's America. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, because no man buyeth her merchandise anymore. What do? We have it manufactured in China and we sell it. We're a nation of consumers. What we don't consume here, we import or export, rather. You understand what I mean? This is a great city. Was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, which to me is sort of a representation of black, red, white, and blue. But you know what I mean? That's a whole nother topic and a whole nother discussion. But at any rate, He's talking about us in terms of our music, all of the great music around the world. It's birthplace to your jazz, rock, funk, disco, everything formulated here. You know what I mean? But this is where it gets it to where, he says that they had odors, ointments, frankincense, wine, oil, flour, wheat, bees, sleep, sheep, horses, chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. If you know anything about the music and Hollywood and acting and all of those, even the religious and political industry. This is why he says it's a habitation of devils. And don't get it twisted. He only calls Mystery Babylon because when John saw this vision, there was no place on earth that described this place where he was being shown. This place was a wilderness, right? He said he carried me away into the wilderness. And he saw a scarlet-colored beast. She was sitting upon it. Let's get that trick. Now, when you look at this scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns, meaning that the woman, America, is riding this beast that controls the whole world. That's why she's called the whore. And they said she was arrayed in all of these precious stones and pearls, and having in her cup a handful of abominations, filthiness of her fornication. And that's why he was saying it's a mystery, but yet it's the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And she said this woman, was drunken with the blood of the saints and the blood of martyrs of Yeshua. So we look at our history of 250 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, and the rest in absolute oppression and marginalization and injustices and, all the rest of the adjectives you could think of. All right, now let's go back to that. Let's go back to Jeremiah 51 now, and give you an understanding about the Septuagint and how, being that these people were Greeks who formulated this scripture, why there's 2 different gospels that are in play, and it would be birthed from this type of stuff, right? This type of shenanigan right here, where they took out this imperative prophecy that the Most High was warning the descendants of Judah about the nation that they would be delivered from. Now let's go to this one, Frank. He says, now Babylon is suddenly destroyed, fallen and destroyed. Same thing as Revelation 18. Babylon is fallen, and has become a habitation of devils. It's the same thing, right? And he's telling us to flee out of it. Let's go back to it. He says, he will raise up against Babylon and against them that dwell in the midst of them that rise up against me a destroying wind. And I will send unto Babylon fanners, and they shall fan her and empty her land. For in the day of the trouble, they shall be against her round about. And if you know anything about the first Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar, this never happened. That Persian conflict was resolved without almost a shot. They just took care of the hierarchy and the heads, Nebuchadnezzar's son and all of that. So don't get it confused. This is a prophecy. And he tells us to flee out of the midst of Babylon and deliver every man his soul and be not cut off in her iniquity. For this is the time of the Elohim's vengeance. And he will render, we got to understand this, and he will render unto her a recompense. Babylon is a golden cup, hath been a golden cup in Elohim's hand, that made all of the earth drunk. So in other words, he used America to, and the nations have drunken her wine. Therefore the nations are mad. And and Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Howl for her. Take palm in for her hand. And this also means, so we don't get it twisted, it's a golden cup because his children were captive here. All right. Now let's look at that for clarity, and then we'll come back to that. Let's look at that for clarity. Would be in Zephaniah. Zechariah. My bad. He tells us, deliver thyself. Same thing. Flee and every man deliver his soul. Deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwelleth with the daughter of Babylon. Let's look at another one. Right? Let's look at another one. I want to find where he says, there we go. And that's Micah. Let's go to Micah. Now look at what he says in Micah. He says, in that day saith the Elohim, I will assemble her that halteth, and I will gather her that is driven out, and her that hath been afflicted. And I will make her that halteth a remnant, and her that is cast far off a strong nation. And the Elohim shall reign over them in Mount Zion, and from henceforth even forever. And thou, O tower of the flock, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion, that's us, unto thee shall it come, even unto the first dominion. The kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem, that's us. Now why dost thou cry aloud? Is there no king in thee? Is thy counselor perished? For pangs have taken thee as a woman in travail. He's talking about us right now. He said, so be in pain, labor to bring forth, O daughter of Zion. That's us, like a woman in travail. For now thou shalt go forth out of the city, that was Jerusalem, and thou shalt dwell in the fields of Africa, and thou shalt even go into Babylon, that's America, and there shalt thou be delivered. You know anything about the other Babylon, we were never delivered from there. They were delivered from Persia and in the Medes and the Persian Empire, 70 years afterwards. And they just allowed them to come back, those who were willing. This is a deliverance, meaning that in your time of distress, I'm going to come get you. He said, there shall the Elohim redeem thee from the hand of thine enemies. Many nations are gathered against thee that say, let her be defiled and let our eye look upon Zion. This can't be disputed again. This is Babylon, make no mistake. And we are the children of the Elohim. This doesn't apply to any of those Grecians who call themselves Jews because they're not among their enemies. America and Israel are best friends. So let's go back there. Let's go back to Jeremiah and let's deal with the root of all of this, the trickery and blasphemies that come off with them that call themselves Jews that are not. All right. Jeremiah 51. Now he's going back. Now he says, now make bright the arrows. These are missiles now. And gather the shields. For the Elohim have raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes. That's Iran. If you know anything about this conflict with Iran, Iran is front and center of everything that's going on in American foreign policy, particularly as it comes to war. For his device is against Babylon to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of the Elohim, the vengeance of his temple. Meaning that what we went through with the Roman Empire destroying our temple, oh yeah, this is revenge. He said, set up the standard upon the walls of Babylon and make the watch strong and set up the watchmen, prepare the ambushes. For the Elohim hath both devised and done that which he has spake against the inhabitants of Babylon. And thou that dwellest upon many waters, abundant in treasures, thine end is come, and the measure of thy covetousness. This is thee. And he goes into the destruction that he was about to give it to. He said, the portion of Jacob is not like them, for he is the former of all things, and Israel is the rod of his inheritance, for the Elohim of hosts is his name. And he's saying that thou art my battle axe, my weapons of war. For with thee I will break in pieces the nations, and with thee I will destroy the kingdoms. And with thee I will break in pieces the horses and his rider. And with thee I will break in pieces the chariot and his rider. He's saying with you. He's saying with you as his hands, as his battle axe, he's going to do this to horses and riders and nations and kingdoms. And I will break in pieces man and woman. And with thee I will break in pieces old and young. And with thee I will break in pieces the young man and the maid. Shepherds and the flock. Husband, he's telling you everything. Okay, everything. I am against thee, O destroying mountain. He calls us a destroying mountain because we've destroyed many nations and governments. Saith the Elohim, we destroyeth all the earth, either with our poisons and our products and our food. And I will stretch out my hand upon thee and roll thee down from the rocks and make thee like a burnt mountain. And thou shalt not take of thee a stone for the corner, neither a stone for a foundation, but thou shalt be desolate forever. Now set up the standard in the land and blow the trumpet among the nations. Prepare the nations against her and call the nations against her, the kingdoms of Ararat. That's Turkey. If you know anything about Turkey right now, what he says, he's actually plotting an invasion of Israel and telling America to stay out of it because your troops you got in the region don't want no smoke. Many, which is Armenia, and being that Turkey and Armenia unsettled their differences, those two nations are down. And now the Americans and the Israelis basically abandoned Armenia because they're believing in the Messiah, Christianity, as it were. So that puts them on the other side of it. Then the Ashkenaz, which is the Russians, and appoint a captain against her, and causes the horses to come up as the wrath of Calipeters. Appear against her the nations with the king of the Iranians, the Medes, and the captains thereof, and all the rulers thereof, and all the land of his dominion. So this is prophecy is telling you about their destruction. So let's go into it. So I have the Brenton Bible, right? And you just seen what we read and what was considered what's in Revelation 18, Jeremiah 50, 51, Isaiah 14. And this is things that I'll show you just from this one, right? Now look at the difference in the passages. No mention of the Medes. See this? No mention of Judah. This is going back to this completely different narrative. The word came to Jeremiah for the Jews dwelling in the land of Egypt. That's not what that passage says at all. That's not what that passage says at all. Raise up against Babylon in the midst of them that rise up against me. He says nothing about Egypt in here. Right? Now look at what they're saying. And I will send to you servants and the prophets early in the morning. Just skip it down from it. He said they will destroy all the remnant that are in Egypt. So they're basically transferring this prophecy into them who were living in Alexandria and making a prophecy to them that were dwelling in Egypt. And they're proselytes. He said, ye have forgotten the sins of your fathers and the sins of the kings of Judah and the sins of your princes and the sins of your wives, which they wrought in the land of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem, and have not ceased of even unto this day, and they have kept not thy ordinances, which is a feeble attempt at trying to clean up some of the deeds they did as Samaritans in the land of Judah and Pharisees, which is prophecy basically dealing with them, which I had set before the fathers. Therefore, thus saith the Elohim, behold, I set my face against you, and I will destroy all the remnant that are in Egypt. See? And the men that knew their wives burned incense, and all the women in great multitude, and all the people that dwell in the land of Egypt. And Pethura answered Jeremiah, saying, see, this is completely different in where we burn incense to the queen of heaven. That's Diana. Remember that? Oh my gosh, this is so crazy. And look, they only go up to 30. And let's look at King James, right? Look at where he goes up to. All of this I read to you. 35 chapters gone. 35 verses gone. All dealing with America. You follow what I'm saying? This is an amazing. I mean, I know ain't nobody ever showed y'all this, but so when you hear people talking about the Septuagint, just know that's not written for your people. You got the story right here. You got the story right here. It's Greek, written for the Greek. All right, well, let's continue. Not two more. So let's go into some more Acts of Paul. Let's get back on track here with Paul. So let's go into Acts 21st, where I remember him. Let's go into Acts. First, let's get out of the Brenton Bible. Let's go into Acts. Excuse me, folks. Let's go into Acts 21. Okay? Now he was saying that they had gotten, and it came to pass that they were gotten from them and had launched, and we came to a straight course from Kos. And the day followed on the roads, and from thence unto Patara. And finding the ship sailing over to Phoenicia, we went abroad and set forth. Now, when we had discovered Cyprus, we had left it on the left hand and sailed into Syria and landed at Tyre. For there the ship was unlaid unto her burden. And finding disciples, we tarried there 7 days. And these are people, the disciples. Remember, there's the distinction between disciples and apostles. Apostles were the 12 that the Messiah chosen and sent. Disciples are just people who claim, and some truly and some, falsely. You know what I mean? Call themselves disciples. You know what I mean? Like his disciples, I would say falsely. He's saying, finding disciples, we tarried there 7 days, who said to Paul through the Spirit that he should not go up to Jerusalem. In other words, they're basically letting them know that these people who the Most High was letting them know, as per Job and the devil asking them, getting permission from the Elohim in the day you've read it. Well, this is one of those things the Spirit was letting them know. Don't come here. Don't teach to my people. You know what I mean? So anyway, let's look at some of the things that he says in when he's on his first initial meetings, right? And he said, on the day following, Paul went in with us unto James and unto the elders that were present, and he saluted them and declared particularly what things Yah had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified the Elohim and said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe, and they are all zealots of the law. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest of all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither walk after the customs. Wherefore it is, what is it therefore? The multitude must needs come together, for they will hear that thou art come. So he's basically explaining to him that we hearing that you telling people not to circumcise. This is the disciples saying to him, particularly James, who was eventually by Paul's group crucified, or I keep saying that in terms of martyred, but martyred for, the Messiah and for Yeshua. And by Paul's little, his little clique. And we see that earlier. I'll go back to that in a second. Well, he says, therefore, do therefore this as we say to thee. We have 4 men which have a vow on them. So take them and purify yourself with them, and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know those things, whereof we were informed concerning thee, and are nothing, but that thou thyself walkest orderly and keepest the law. So he basically telling you to go with them and purify yourself with them. So we know that these charges against you concerning what they got against you, about you and the incision, the circumcision and all that, if all of that is nothing. And as touching the Gentiles which believe, we have written and concluded that they do observe no such thing, save only that they keep themselves from things offered to idols, and from blood, and from strangled, and from fornication. Then Paul took them in on the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple. So they call this the Purim and all that. You've heard about it, where it was some kind of, where you went into the water, you basically cleaned, you purified yourself in front of the temple or in the vicinity of the temple, and you came back, and then you were able to enter the temple, which is different from a synagogue. Remember this. This is what we're talking about, where the disciples, James and them, were. See the distinction? Now, he said to signify the accomplishment of the days of the purification, unto that an offering should be offered for every one of them. So you had to make an offering as well. And when the 7 days were almost ended, they had to purify themselves, and they were unclean for 7 days. The Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people and laid hands on him, crying out, Men of Israel, help. This is the man that teaches all the men everywhere against the people and the law and his place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple, and have polluted this holy place. So the Hebrews were saying they brought this white man in here and polluted. Man, it's not so much a white man, but just what he was teaching. Let's just get, because from what I can tell, he looked like an Egyptian, which would have meant that being the Egyptians were mixed with the Alexandrians, or those who came from Greek in Alexandria. You would imagine that they kind of look biracial, like the Greeks look today. They look like, they're part Negro, part white man, and a mixture of like we do here in America when we mix. So it's no different. The only thing that it distinguishes their hair and the type of hair type they have. You know what I mean? But at any rate, he's saying that immediately they took the soldiers and the centurions, ran down unto them, and they saw the chief captain and the soldiers, and they left beating us. So Paul got beat down over that. All right? And somehow he was able to survive that, which is also suspect. Nobody had to lay his hands on him. The Messiah had to come raise people from the dead. Here it is, this man getting up himself. I'm a man of the Jew of Tarsus, of the city of Cilicia. Remember we were dealing with that with the synagogue? Where's that, 9? Nope, that was 7, I believe it was. Or 6, one of them. Let's go back to it. Oh, it was 6. All right. See? A Cilicia. We just read that where he's Paul of Tarsus of Cilicia. Oh my goodness. See it in your face, and how certain doctrines can blind you of things that are sitting right in your face. All right, these people are of a particular bloodline. And let's go back to that for clarity. Those who were in there and how they got there to where they could even claim any of this by virtue of them being Pharisees, which they observed the law at that point. And now he's telling you there because they couldn't handle the law. The law was having them the way they couldn't be sinful. So that's why the gospel of their Jesus was convenient for them, to where now they got a free pass to do whatever sins they wanted to do. And this Zeus would basically free them from it. Now, where are we going? We go into 2 Kings. 2 Kings 17, right? Now, let's look at that. The children of Israel, we read that the last time, but this is where it's at. He said, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried away Israel away into Assyria. This is the 10 tribes now, not the kingdom of Judah, right? And he says, now, the children of Israel, it goes through the things that they did. They rejected his statute and his covenant and made with their fathers. So you can imagine the people who replaced him were going to do the same thing. And he said, the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cutha and from Ava and from Hamath and from Sepharvaim. These are all European cities. Cutha, that's supposed to be where the Scythians come from and where the Khazarians come from. And the Babylonians is basically the Tower of Babel, and where the men of whatever descent they come from. And that's up for debate in terms of that, because at that time, if you're looking at the Tower of Babel, it was all of the nations of the earth, all of the sons of men were all congregated at the Tower of Babel. So they could have just been some of the children of Japheth or the children of Ham, whoever, and just stayed there. And I would imagine it would have been, of the Canaanite tribes type thing, because Nimrod was of the children of Ham, and he made his cities there. Nimrod, and it tells you Iraq and all of these, which I imagine is modern day Iraq. Well, anyway, Cutha, which is in Europe, which is where the Huns and most people argue, Ukraine and all of those lands between the Caspian and Black Sea, and Ava and Hamath and Sepharvaim, and he placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. And so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there. And they feared not the Elohim. Therefore, the Elohim sent lions among them. So we understand that this is exactly where they begin there. Now, I want to get into a little things where he's telling you there that these people came in there and they were the Pharisees, because the Pharisees were able to get in there and own and operate all the synagogues. And by the way, this is what he was referring to in Revelation 2:9-2. People think that this is a prophecy. It's not a prophecy. Maybe he was telling us about waiting tables. Peter and them were saying about waiting tables and all that. He's saying it to the church of Smyrna, which, if you notice, none of the churches that Paul wrote to are Smyrna. You know what I mean? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So these are all the seven golden candlesticks of the Messiah, and his are completely different, other than Ephesus. We saw that in the last video. But look at what he says to the Smyrna. Thus saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. I know thy works, and thy tribulation and thy poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So synagogue is basically just a word for congregation, temple, meeting place. But there's the distinction. That's why he adds it, that this meeting place is for those who worship Satan. And look at 3:9. He's talking to the angel of Philadelphia. Remember that? Philadelphus? Right? This is one of the 7 churches of that the Most High, instead of the people of. See the difference? He's talking to the people of Galatians, meaning that any Gentile that lives in Galatians can get Paul's message. Messiah is only talking to the church in Philadelphia, showing that we were in captivity and this was our place where we met. See that? to the Corinthians. He don't say the church at Corinthia. You hear what I'm saying? He said to the church of God, which is that? What's the church of God? This is crazy. It's crazy. But either way, like I said, this is the churches that he spoke to that are different. And let's go back to Revelation, what he says in Revelation 3:9. Got off of mine. He says, now I know thy works, and behold, I set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it. For thou hast little strength, and hast kept my word, and not denied my name. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. I will make them come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. So he's telling you, I have kept my word and my patience, and I will also keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. This is why I think that this teaching is so timely, because this is what I believe we are going through at this very minute. You understand what I mean? And so let's continue that, because I need to get into a little bit of his teaching in terms of where he got his spirit and where we got ours. Now let's look at what he says in 1:17. Now I'm gonna go into let's go into it directly then. Let's go into Galatians 1:17 directly. Now what did he say? He says, now to profit the Jews' religion and many equals in my own nation. So he's saying what he believed, and he equals him in his own nation, being more exceedingly zealous of the traditions of my father. Oh my goodness. People got to understand what he's saying here. He said, but when it pleased Yah, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me by his grace to reveal his son in me, that I may preach among the heathen. And all of you, and I hate to call you out your name, so I'm not going to do that. But this is where you keep hearing that. You can put Gentile there. For all of you people who want to say that he was preaching to Hebrew Israelites who were Hellenized in Asia and Europe. Paul. And that's just ridiculous. See? That's the same word. That's the same word. Ethnos, a race, a habit, a tribe, foreign, a non-Jewish one, Gentile, heathen, nation. Y'all like to put the third one in. It just means nation. Forgetting these front two, which is an insult to my intellect when I see y'all doing that. And you're going to pay for it. These are a foreign nation, non-Jewish. Most High never referred to us as heathens. And let's look at what he says. That right there just ticks me off to even think about what I'm hearing people saying. And he said, now listen, he revealed his son to him to preach among the heathen. Immediately I conferred not with the flesh and blood, neither went I up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me. But he went to Arabia and returned again unto Damascus. So Arabia, we look at that. Let's look at that in the Greek. Let's look at that in the Greek, right? Let's see if they give you justice on it, like the Septuagint, and try to hide what it says, right? He says, through an idea of a covering with a texture, to grow dusky at sundown, to be darkened, a sense of sterility. All right? And let's look at the Old Testament. Let's go to a passage. Let's go to a passage where he speaks of in the mixed multitude. Okay, let's go to the mixed multitude, right? That left Egypt with us. Right? He said, now the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot, that were men beside the children. And a mixed multitude went up also with them, in flocks and herds, even with very much cattle. Right? Now, let's look at it. Let's look at what that means. So he's saying that mixed multitude was an Arab. Comes from this word. A mixture, to braid, to intermix, to traffic, to give, to be security, to engage, to mingle. But let's look at where it says, let's go back to it. Let's go back to the original. Let's go back to the original. A mixture, a mongrel race, mingled people. You see? So he's saying these people are mixed. And they're a mongrel race. So that is your background and your foundation. Let's look at something that we can read about in the book of Ezra. Right? Well, he says now, he's telling Ezra's a prophecy. And he's telling Ezra, now calamities have come upon the whole earth, and you shall remain in them. This is 4th Ezra's, mind you. For Yah will not deliver you because you have sinned against him. And he says, goes into this prophecy and this vision. He says, behold, a terrifying sight appearing in the east. And the nations of the dragons of Arabia shall come out with many chariots. And from that day they set out, the Hishon shall spread over the earth, so that all who hear them fear and tremble. Also the Carmonians, raging in wrath, shall go forth like the wild boars of the forest, and with great powers they shall come, engage them in battle, and they shall devastate a portion of the land, and the Assyrians with their teeth. And then the dragons, remembering their origin, shall become stronger, and if they combine in great power, shall turn and pursue them. And then these shall be disorganized and silenced by their power, and shall turn and flee. And from the land of the Assyrians and the enemy in ambush shall beset them and destroy one of them. And fear and trembling shall come upon their army, and indecision upon their kings. And behold, clouds from the east, and from the north, and from the south, and the appearance is very threatening, full of wrath and storm. And they shall dash against one another, and shall pour out heavy tempest upon the earth, and upon their own tempest. And there shall be blood from the sword as high as a horse's belly, and a man's thigh, and a camel's hop. And there shall be fear and trembling upon the earth, for those who see that wrath shall be horror-stricken, and they shall be seized with trembling. And this thing gets into all kinds, mighty clouds, full of wrath and tempest, destroy the earth, fire, hail, and flying swords. Those are missiles. Floods of water and fields. So he's talking about, particularly, let's go back here so we don't get it. This is another description of Armageddon, where the blood's supposed to come to a horse's bridle, when he gathered all the nations and plead with him. So he's telling you, these people of these nations, of the dragons of Arabia, he's telling you that he went, not only that is a let's take a look at it, give you an idea for some clarity. I know I'm kind of mixing it up, giving you a lot of information on this one right here. But let's give it up. Let's go to the dragon. Let's go to the dragon, right? Let's go to the dragon in Revelation. Let's expand this a little bit. All right, now let's go to the dragon in Revelation. Let's get rid of that. And let's do it again. Now let's look at this. Where he sees the great red dragon. Here we go. All right. He said, now there the great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail threw a third part of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Excuse me. And that dealing with a prophecy, but I want you to focus on the fact that this dragon here, it had 7 heads and 10 horns, and the crowns showing that the leadership or the authority was on the heads. Right? Now let's skip down to the Babylonian one. I ain't gonna call it Babylonian, but it's the last one, right? Now he says, excuse me, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns, right? Right? And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. And I wanted to find out where he says, and the crown was upon. Hold on, let's look at the second one. Let me go back to it. I don't want to get ahead of it. All right. Okay, I think that is. Okay, let me go to another. Let me go to 13. Let me go to 13. It's got to be there. All right. All right. Well, let's go to the Strongs and find it. I don't want to waste time on it. Right, and let's narrow the search to Revelation. All right, now look at this. All right. Okay, here it goes. Crowns upon his head and upon his horns in 13:1. I was in it and passed it. Sorry about that, folks. Now he's going to, remember this one in 12 was the devil, because you can remember this one was the tail his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven. So we know that's a reference to Satan, the heads. Okay, at least in this particular narrative, in this particular illustration of this prophecy, right, where he threw a third of the part of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth, right? And then they tried to devour the woman as soon as she was born. Now, going back to 13, he said he stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. Now, what does that mean about the horns? All right. We'll notice a little bit more about that in Revelation 17. Now, he says, now this woman, the great prostitute, he said, there came unto me 7 angels, 7 vials. He said, come here, I'm going to show you the judgment of America. The great whore that sitteth upon many waters. And that don't mean a system, because they're meaning that her power extends to every water. Okay? She controls all of the waters and she controls all of the land that's on the earth. That's why they say she sits on 7 mountains. There's 7 continents. And he said, now with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names and blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and all that. And we're getting back to this one, and it told her that, mystery Babylon the Great, mother of harlots, drunken with the blood of the saints. This is America in our history. And he said, now the beast that you saw was and is not and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. So that's a representation to someone that was dead in hell, and now they back out of hell as per Daniel, and they shall mingle their seed with the seed of men. When you're talking about a hybrid people that was part spiritual or part demon, part human. That's what he meant by the iron and mixed with Mary clay. The Most High formed us out of clay. Now, I want to get off too much into that, but you hear what I'm saying. He's saying that this beast was dead, and this is where I think where he said that he saw him, that he was, is because of the reference to the Canaanites and how the children of Israel, all of those Canaanites who were basically allied with the dragon or the demons back then, and Joshua and Moses destroyed them all, cleansed the land from them. 70 kings, as it were. You read it in the book of Joshua, combining the book of Deuteronomy and Numbers, and then you get into Joshua, you'll see the wars that they had. And he says that this nation was. He said, so they were in which is considered the bottomless pit. That's why you got that prophecy of Apollyon and Apollo's coming out. And he said, they shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose name were not written written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. Now he says, here is wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains which the woman sit. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. He's talking about the 5 kingdoms of Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Greece, and Persia. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and Greece. Those are the 5 that have fallen. The 1 is Rome, which he's in. He said, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short speech. And the beast that was, saying that when he's coming, he that was and is not, he is of the 7 and goes, he is the 8th and goes into perdition. So he's the one that hasn't come yet. You following what I'm saying? And he was only going to be around for a little while. And if you're looking at 1945 until now, that's not a long space. Continue, if you're considering history. He said, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as of yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. And they shall have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. Now let's look at that into the 10 horns. Remember I tell you the 10 horns, going back into the concept of Arabia and the dragons of Arabia, and this battle that would lead into the blood to a horse's bridle. Let's go to Psalms 83 and let's consider those 10 horns. Psalms 83. All right. Now let's look at the 10 horns. He said, now thine enemies have and make a tumult. I don't know why my words are just colliding, because maybe my mind is moving faster than my mouth. Anyway, because I'm trying to cram a lot in here, so forgive me, folks. I'm kind of moving ahead of my own brain. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. So he's telling you these people that he's about to talk about hate you, and they're your enemies. And they have taken crafty counsel against thy people. and consulted against thy hidden ones. And they have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. This is why we're going through what we're going through, because of the conspiracy that you're about to see who played a part in. And they have consulted together with one consent, and they are confederate against you. And that's the tabernacles of Edom, which you could say is Israel, and the Ishmaelites, Moab, Hagarenes, Gabal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistines, and the inhabitants of Tyre and Asher. And they have helped the children of Lot, which all of these fall under the category of because of Moab and Ammon. And the mixing and mingling, because remember, Arab means mingled. So let's count them. Remember the 10 heads. Now let's first see. Well, we'll get into that in a second. Well, the 10 heads got 10 crowns, right? Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And these all fall under the umbrella of the children of Lot. Now, these nations, as per the Ottoman Empire, didn't receive a kingdom as per this prophecy. Let's go back down to the prophecy. As per the prophecy in 17. Okay. He said, now these 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings or kingdoms. Let's look at that in the Strong's. Or 10 horns, which are 10 kings. Let's find that, right? Basilus, to walk, to pace, that is the foot. Sovereign, for parasitic, a king. Well, that's Greek, so they basically using the which is really applicable in another way if you want to look at it. When Messiah says, "Seek ye first the kingdom," he's basically telling you, seek your walk. Seek your walk with him first, and all these things will be added unto you. But that's just a little caveat there, because the Greek meanings don't know when they're trying to be deceptive, they can be actually helpful in some instances. Well, anyway, these 10 kings, he says that they haven't received a kingdom yet, but will receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So if you look at per the Ottoman Empire, 1945, after World War II, all these nations we know of as Syria, Iraq, Iran, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, modern day Israel, all of these nations took on the names of antiquity, the names of their origin. And it's letting you know that we're in the consummation. But this is the fulfillment of that prophecy in 1945, when these nations of Psalms 83, and if you notice, all of these nations of Psalms 83 are all Arab nations, except for Edom, which could be both, being that they're mixed. You follow me? So I'm just spinning around here spinning my wheels. But look at all of these nations. They're all Arab nations, every one of them. Syrians, Ammon and Moab, Amalek, which some people believe is the Syrians. The Philistines, which you know of as Gaza, and I showed you the prophecy of Gaza last time. You know what I mean? Because of their hand in the captivity, they're going through what they're going, and he's going to go in this whole order. He's going to go after each one of these nations one by one. Assyria is already, by way of Syria is already a wasteland. It's already a wasteland. These three are the only three left. Edom, Moab, and Ammon. The rest of them are all going to band against them. And this is why this is all really crazy, because it ends up in what they consider a world war, where all these nations, as per the prophecy of Ishmael, that every man's hand would be against his brother. This is what you see culminating over there. You understand what I mean? So let's look at Acts. But anyway, that point was just showing you that he went up here to Arabia, where we went to Jerusalem. All of our feasts, think about this now. All of our feasts, where were we at? Galatians, right? Galatians 1:17. Now, all of our feasts, all of our ordinances, he told Moses, he told all of the children of Israel, you will not do certain things here. You'll only do them until we get to the place, or when we get to the place where I place my name there. Yahushua, Yaroshalayim. Okay? So everything is that. The Feast of Tabernacles, where all of the world, the Pentecost, all of the Jews came from all over the world and came there for the Feast of Trumpet, where David and the high priest, they would have the word in the spirit, where they'll pray or get a vision or whatever the Most High did, particularly the book of Psalms, tells you at least how it was in David's day, where they would have the spirit talk to them. And you'll see this in the book of Psalms. Look at this. He said, the Psalm of David, when he fled from Ephraim. Now let's go to when they start getting into, because I know it's now, to the chief musician on the Niganoth, a Psalm of David. Now let's look at that real quick. This is another sidebar. Forgive me, because I'm trying to feed y'all as much as I can. A Niganoth is a stringed instrument. So in other words, the chief musician would hear David play on the Niganoth. That word is funny. They're like, what a name, Niganoth. Anyway, it's a stringed instrumental instrument. And by extension, a poem set to music, especially what they call an epigram. You know what an epigram? An epigram is basically reverse reading music. Instead of reading the music and playing it and reading the music on paper and playing the notes, he's playing the notes and then writing them on paper. That's why we get the Psalms. David played it, and the chief musician translated it from the music to words. That's an epigram. So all of this is happening at the place where he placed his name there, where his glory. Everybody said that the spirit of the Elohim resided in Judah. I mean, come on. And he's saying that, no, I didn't go there. I didn't go there. I went to where the dragons go. I went to where the dragons are. You hear that? Then he said after that he went up there to see Peter. Which I believe all of this is a lie. Because he was just talking about it in Acts, how he was beefing with him, calling him a hypocrite and all that. So I think he was telling people, depending on what people he was talking to, and the people of Galatia who apparently heard about Peter, or maybe Peter was there too, because remember the prophecy that when the Most High told Peter that when he got older, he was going to be girded up and taken where he didn't want to go. You understand what I mean? And that would lead, and they said this signifying his death. And as we know, part of history that during the siege of Nero, or during the persecution of Nero, I should say, that Peter and Paul were both killed together. And they don't know if it's on the same day, but they know it was of the same event and the same series of executions. He was among them. I don't know which order they were in, don't really care. But I know that this was a prophecy fulfilled. The Most High told him that somebody was going to lead him. Now, if he was out chasing Peter, or going back and forth with him, or arguing back with him, because as you saw in that prophecy I showed earlier, that they had the word out on him that he was teaching two different things. So they said, just in case, you need to go ahead and purify yourself, as with these other men, before you can come up in the temple. And when he got up in there, they went to arrest him and beat him down. From what I understand, from an inch of his life, stoned him and everything. But he survived, raised himself up from the dead. How he did it, I don't know. So what I'm saying is that this whole thing is telling you that everything is off in terms of where his people are from and what they were teaching and where we get our information and where we get the spirit that taught us versus the spirit that taught him. It's antithetical to everything we know. Here he came to all Gentiles, Syria, Cilicia. And it's just crazy because if we don't see this, we don't understand that you're receiving teaching from somebody who intended it for somebody else. You just all up in the mix and don't have no business in there and no place in there. Look at what he says in the book of Ezra. And remember, we go through where Paul says that he is a Pharisee, son of a Pharisee, right? Let's look at that first. Let's look at that first. Let's look at that first, right? A Pharisee, Hebrew of the Hebrews. Ain't that something? He said, circumcised on the 8th day of the stock of Israel, but yet he goes around talking like he ain't circumcised. That's what's so crazy about it. But I'm sure that he might have been hanging around with Gamaliel. They might have circumcised him. But then again, from what I understand, Titus wasn't circumcised. Let's go back to that real quick. Right? Let's go back to where he says that he didn't believe that. Here you go, it's in Galatians. But neither Titus, who was with me being Greek, was compelled to be circumcised. So he can tell you right here, he's telling these Galatians now, as opposed to what he was telling Peter and them, and yeah, he was telling them that he lied to him. Yeah, I was telling them to circumcise, but he's telling him that you hear, and he told Titus, who was with me being a Greek, or being of the Greek race, he was compelled to be circumcised. So he wasn't compelled to be circumcised. And that because of false brethren unawares brought in, who came in privily to spy out our liberty, which we have in Yeshua. I ain't going to say that because in this context, it's their Jesus, that they might bring us into bondage. So he's saying the circumcision would have brought him into bondage. The gospel of the circumcision was unto Peter. He's saying, but contrariwise, when they saw that the gospel of the uncircumcision was committed unto me, as the gospel of the circumcision was unto Peter. So he's saying that I'm just as committed to the uncircumcision gospel as Peter is to the circumcision of the gospel of the circumcision. I can't even say it. It's so crazy. That's so crazy. Ain't that something? So let's look at this in Esdras 4. Let's finish that and close this out. Because I kind of went off on a tangent, but I fed you a lot of stuff that you probably hadn't considered before. And I hope when you're looking at this, you'll understand when he talks about how he's a Pharisee, son of a Pharisee, you know what I mean? A Hebrew of the Hebrews. And you know how Messiah said that you'd say whatever, you know what he said, that I am all things to all men. He tells you, he don't give a darn about what he's saying to somebody, as long as he think he can beguile them into believing what he wants them to believe. Now listen to what he's saying here, where going back to the Assyrians, remember we were talking about the Samaritans and how the Pharisees got there. For him to be a Pharisee and how they were in there running things and controlling and oppressing and having us become servants to the children of Israel or children of Judah that was in there. Now look at what he says here in 4:7 here. And he said, now in the days of Artaxerxes wrote Bishlam, Merodach, Tabeel, and the rest of their companions under Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And the writing of the letter was written in the Syriac tongue and interpreted in the Syrian tongue. So these men who were apparently living in Samaria were still writing in Syrian, where we think of is Aramaic. That's what I would call it. Right? So they were speaking in the Syrian tongue. And he said, and Rehum the chancellor and Shimshai the scribe wrote a letter against Jerusalem and Artaxerxes the king in this sword. Then he wrote Raham the chancellor and Shimshai the scribe and the rest of their companions, the Danaites. Let's see who they are. Right? Right? And first, let's go back to there. He said he hired counsel against them to frustrate the Persians all the days of Cyrus. I need to read that for context, y'all, so we get it. He said, then they came to Babel and the chief of the fathers and said to them, let us build with you, for we seek your God, as you do. And we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Asardon, king of Assyria, or king of Assyria, who brought us here. Confirmation in the book of Ezra that the second kings, when he said that the king of Babylon or the king of Assyria brought them there and replaced the men of Israel or the children of Israel with them of Babylon and all that. So he said that we have been here sacrificing since the days of Asardon, king of Assyria. And Zerubbabel and Jeshua, which was his Zerubbabel and Yeshua, which is tell you want to deal with the name. This is the first Hebrew, and not gonna say the first, but it's one of the only places that you'll see the name of Yeshua written in the Old Testament, and how his name, being it was only three, it was Yeshua, son of Nun, and it was Yeshua, the high priest, and Yeshua, the Messiah. These are the only Yeshuas. Yah will save. Ain't no he. Yeshua will save. And look how they changed it. Can't help it. Put Jehovah in there. You know what I mean? But they still can't help. Got to tell the truth, though. Hayah. Right? And they say, compare that to, I'm going to go back to where they got, let's go back. Let's go back. Let's go back. Compare to Hosea and Yeshua. You seeing that? Yeshua. They're telling you to take Hoshua, right? And their definition of Jehovah saved and Jehoshua, that is Joshua. So they're telling you, how can there be Jesus and Joshua? Right? And they're saying that this is Yahushua. But to compare it. Really deep. Now think about this for a second now. He's telling you here that since the days of Zerubbabel, they've been there. I mean, you know what I mean? Or since the days of the king of Asardon, they've been there. So the rest of their chief fathers of Israel said unto them, ye have nothing to do with us to build an house unto our Elohim. But we ourselves together, we will build unto Elohim, to Yahweh our Elohim of Israel. As King Cyrus, the king of Persia, hath commanded us. Then the people of the land weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in their building. So in other words, they strove against them, try to sabotage them. And they hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose. And all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even unto the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So they was messing with him. And in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote unto him an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. And in the days of Artaxerxes, they wrote him telling them that the children of Israel are writing this, saying that they wrote to Artaxerxes the king in this sort, and they wrote to the chancellor and Shimshai the scribe and the rest of their companions. And this is what he wrote. He's saying that the Danites, the Parshites, the Tarpelites, the Apharsites, the Archavites, the Babylonians, the Susankites, the Davahites, and the Elamites, and the rest of the nations whom the great noble Asnapper brought over and set in the cities of Samaria. That was his name, the king of Assyria. You notice they never used it. They just said the king of Assyria. His name was Asnapper. And the rest that are on this side of the river are at such a time. This is the copy of the letter that they sent him, even unto Artaxerxes, thy servants, the men on this side of the river, and at such a time. Be it known to the king that the Jews who came up from thee to us and are come to Jerusalem, building the rebellious and the bad city, and have set up the walls thereof and joined the foundation. Be it known now unto the king that if this city be builded and the walls set up again, that they will not pay toll, tribute, and custom, so that they will damage the revenue of the kings. And that they may certify, be it known unto the king. Now, okay, wait a minute. Let me read that part over here. I'm just about to skip over. Now, because we have maintenance from the king's palace, and was not meet for us to see the king's dishonor, therefore we have sent and certified the king, that search may be made in the book of records of thy fathers, so that they may find in the book of records and know this city is a rebellious city and hurtful unto the kings and provinces, that they move sedition within the same of old time, for which caused this city destroyed. We certify the king that if this city be builded again and the wall set up by this means, shall have no portion in this side of the river. Wow. You see what they're saying to them? He's saying that the king of the king of these Sumerians wrote to the king of Assyria, all right, that the children of Israel who are back there, that they already got the city destroyed. And if he let them back in there and rebuild this temple, that they're going to mess up the king's revenue. Heard what he said? They're going to mess up the king's revenue. Let me find that again. Because I know that make you dizzy floating back up and down this page here real quick. He's saying that if this city be built and the walls set up again, they will not pay their dues, their tributes, and their and customs. And so shall it be that it shall damage the revenue of the king. See, that's the accuser of the saints, being the devil. And this is where we got into, where we touched on a little bit earlier, where they were using the genealogies, where they always talk about the genealogy of, don't get into foolish genealogies. Well, y'all set that in motion right here. He's telling them that they want you to search out all of these people, find out what lineage they come from, the records of their fathers, so you can find out which one of them and why these people coming back to this city moved to sedition of the time old and why this city was destroyed. So it was because of them they started going into the genealogy. But then Paul is saying it's silly and it's vain and profane. Because the Israelites were saying, or the Yehudi was saying, if you part of the Yehudi, then you got to prove that through your records. You got to prove that through your lineage, that you are the seed of Jacob. Either one of the 12 tribes, you got to be one of those tribes. So at that point, it became ridiculous to Paul and them, the way they taught against it. So when it suited them, they were using it to try to get us kicked out of there. But what I'm trying to prove to you is that listed among them is the Farsites. And I suspect also the these other guys too, though. These where is it? Keep passing the daggone thing. All right, let me find this right here. Here it go, right in my face. And he's saying that the Apharkathites. This is where we get the word of Farsi from. And he's telling you they're from Assyrian. It's their Syrian tribe. But yet they were teaching and running things in Jerusalem. Right? And he's the son of one. And he's the perfect Hebrew as pertaining to it. Right? And this is the Apharsites. This is how they got there. To be up here in the middle with the Messiah, teasing him. Let's go to Pharisee. Let's go to Pharisee a little bit here. All right, well, let's just go to the spell it again because I'm not going to waste any time. Oops. Okay. Now let's look at the let's add an S to it. Let's look at what all of the things the Messiah was saying to him. We'll see that in red. This is where he come from. He said they love the uttermost rooms at feasts and the chief seats at the synagogues. He's talking about the Pharisees. He knows that this is set apart. They were the ones occupying the synagogues. He said, for they bind heavy burdens and grievous to the born and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. So they won't help them. But all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments. You see what they're doing? They drive it, put all of the fringes on it and all of the different things like they do in Catholic Church and the rabbis with all of their garbs and their robes. They love the uttermost rooms at the feasts, the chief seats in the synagogues, and the greetings in the markets to be called of men rabbi, rabbi. So he said, be called rabbi. For one is your master, even the Messiah, for ye are all brethren. So he's saying all that rabbi stuff is trash. Neither be ye called masters, for one is your masters. Now let's look at Paul. All right? Where's that one? He says, slaves, love your masters. Okay. Servants, obey your masters according. See that? Where is that passage at? Slaves, obey your masters. Let's get into that. Servants, obedience to your masters. Oh, they changed it. That's why I can't. They changed that. Servants used to be slaves. See that? This is the slave. These are the slave laws. This is the only part of the scriptures they let us read. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or to governors, or to them that are sent by them for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of them which do dwell. As free as using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness, but as servants of God. Honor all men. So he's talking to the free and the slaves. Love your brotherhood and fear God and honor the king. Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and the gentle, but also to the froward. Telling you to fear your damn masters. Exhort servants to be here. Exhort your servants to be obedient to their masters. This is what he's teaching Titus. He said, you see that? Be not many masters, not knowing we receive greater condemnation. That's deep. He's telling you not to do it, and everybody else telling you to do it. This is crazy. I wanted to find out where he says, love him with all your heart, give your servants that. Okay, this might be Colossians. And this is kind of getting off into a little bit. I think I done ran the course now. So I think I'm going to end this about this. Servants, obey all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. So he's telling us to be good slaves. Well, the Most High was telling us that you ain't got no masters. Not here. All right, I'm looking at masters. That's why I couldn't find it. Now, let's just do it again. Why did it get rid of it? All right, now look. This is my biggest one. I always wanted to get you there, you Pharisees. You're like whited sepulchres. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, for ye are like unto whited sepulchres, which is a tomb. So apparently they were whited tombs, showing that they were white folks, which indeed appear beautiful on the outward, meaning they dress themselves up, do their hair, and they do their, they beautify themselves. We saw that from the book of Adam and Eve, how they would learn how the children of Cain learned how to beautify themselves and how the devil taught them to. Well, anyway, but he's saying, but you're full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, because you build tombs. This is what he called Peter. Paul was calling Peter this. You build tombs of the prophets and garnish the supplicates of the righteous, and say, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets, in the blood of the prophets. Basically saying, if we would have been there, we wouldn't have did what your fathers did. Wherefore ye be witnesses unto yourselves that ye are the children of them which killed the prophets. Fill ye up then of the measure of your fathers, ye serpents, ye generation of vipers. How can ye escape the damnation of hell? This is what he's saying to the Pharisees. And we worship somebody who's proud of being one. And who are you going to believe? You're going to either believe the Messiah or you're going to believe Paul. Who are you going to believe? I'm going to try to look this up a little bit in your free time. Red Jews and Esau. Think that. In which Alexander the Great encloses a race of heathens behind the Great Wall. And this. See, they're talking about this. They're basically insinuating that these people were the people that Alexander the Great enclosed a race of heathen behind the wall in the Caucasus. But either way, I'm going to close this out right now, my brothers and sisters. And I'm going to tell you, abandon this doctrine of Paul. Watch this one and the next and the previous one. And the evidence is irrefutable. I've seen from the comments, can't nobody refute it. Because I'm teaching you right in your face. This is not hearsay. It's not what I think. Shalom.